CrowdStrike.
The CrowdStrike failure is somehow even bigger of a mess than any of us thought. I really want to emphasize this. This isn't a normal, someone made a small oopsie. There are so many points of failure here. It's actually unbelievable. And now we're finally starting to get more reporting from people who have dug in to see what's up. And of course, some embarrassing updates from CrowdStrike because they don't seem to know how to do anything other than embarrass themselves. And you might have noticed I'm a little frazzled. I already filmed this video and I'm redoing the intro because I did not realize how absurd this was. And every detail I read somehow makes it more embarrassing. From the $10 gift cards they're handing out as an apology to the 13 plus failures I as a web dev could identify, any one of which would have prevented this. They admitted they weren't ever doing staggered releases. I cannot fathom how broken this company is. So without further ado, watch me stumble into madness as I slowly discover the level of insanity that exists at CrowdStrike. Off to Theo from 30 minutes ago before he was so pissed off. Want to know just how bad Delta's meltdown is? The airline has now canceled 5,370 flights and counting since Friday. That's more flights than they canceled in all of 2018 and all of 2019 too, combined. 2 years worth of cancellations in less than 5 days. I hate all of this. So let's talk about the actual cause because, this is a fun one. Thank you to Svante for writing this one. Seems to be a very good source of information, and I'm excited to have somebody smarter covering this so I'll make less dumb mistakes this time. 25 years ago, I said, I did, that automatic software updates pose a greater risk than malware. So he said this before the days of ransomware, but still pretty wise. Many incidents since then have proven this right, but none more so than the CrowdStrike Falcon blue screen of death incident on July 19th. Since, as usual, the company won't release any detailed information on what really happened, we'll have to rely on other sources. I found that Dave Plummer's account on YouTube was very good and trustworthy. Dave actually just posted yet another video covering the stuff, definitely worth checking his stuff out. In summary, after looking at crash dumps and based on his knowledge of how the Windows kernel works, Dave Plummer explains that what happened was probably the following. CrowdStrike has a need to check not only file signatures, but behaviors in general of software on the system. To do this, they've created a device driver that doesn't actually interact with any hardware, but has achieved WHQL release signatures. This is the Windows clearance signature that allows them to be included as an official driver that can be pushed through things like Windows Update. That's a hard certification to get, but clearly it's not hard enough because they were able to get it, and now they're able to hotfix changes to the device driver level on your computer, which, depending on where that driver is loaded, could mean your computer can't even boot. Because again, drivers are supposed to be a thing that lets the software communicate with the hardware, so it's at that really low level on your system. That means it can break things. But it's also important to note that there are different types of drivers. And the really important detail here is that they flagged it as a boot start driver, which means if it cannot load, you cannot boot. Theoretically great to make sure you can't boot the system without this stuff running so that it's much harder to get a virus. If a virus was to theoretically disable the driver, now you can't boot. But as they say here, it was really needed to boot the system. This, of course, is to make sure that it really does get loaded, which is great, as long as it doesn't crash the system, which unfortunately it did. So how did the signed certified driver crash the system? In short, by CrowdStrike hacking the protocol and Microsoft allowing that to happen. We don't know exactly what they did, but the challenge they have is that they feel the need to frequently update what behaviors to watch for. In order to do so, they essentially need to be able to update program logic frequently. They could do so by building a new driver with the new logic and getting it WHQL signed again. So again, if you want to push a driver through Windows Update, every new driver you ship has to go through the Windows process of being approved before it can go through Windows Update. That's why things like graphics drivers are recommended to be installed separately using NVIDIA's util instead of installing them directly through something like Windows Update, because the NVIDIA driver updates through their utility will always be more up to date because they're not blocked by Windows signing them and getting them in the right spot. We've seen my other videos talking about things like code push and hot updates over the air update type stuff. That's what's going on here. Instead of having to wait for Apple or Microsoft or these other companies to let you ship the update, they wanted to be able to do it themselves because if there's a new virus they want to protect all their customers for, they shouldn't have to wait 2 weeks for Microsoft to approve the driver update and then possibly months for all the computers to slowly install that Windows update. They need it out immediately. So what they did is a lot sketchier, as we're about to see. As they say, first it takes time for the driver to get certified, and then updating a driver is not done on the fly, so a reboot would be required. So if they were actually doing this by updating the driver directly, that has some problems because they have to wait now for the driver update to be installed and then for the reboot to happen. If there's a new virus they're trying to protect from, that's going to take too long. So the solution was a pile of sketchy hacks to provide the driver with instructions that define the logic to execute. In other words, one form or another of P code or even machine code. Thus, they can keep the same driver but update the logic by conceptually having the driver call out to external logic. This is what CrowdStrike misleadingly calls a content update. I would call it a code update. So to break this down into more layman's terms, the way this works is that the driver doesn't necessarily contain the actual logic of what they're checking for in terms of potential viruses or exploits. What they're doing here instead is trying to make it so that the logic can be updated separately. So what the driver does is loads what it's supposed to do from somewhere else. So the driver doesn't include the instructions on what it's supposed to do. The driver reads an instructions file that describes all the things it's supposed to do and what it's supposed to look for. That allows it to skip the process of going through the driver update. And as people are saying in chat, very well put, effectively the driver is just running eval. Yes. Theoretically, anyone could put something sketchy in the file that the driver is reading from, and it will just run that. And as such, they're able to skip all of the certifications without doing an update. And as people in chat are noticing, this is an enormous attack vector. It's actually kind of funny that antivirus software exposes such a massive potential to be attacked. The only way I could see this being safe is, and I hope that they're doing this, that they sign that output and that they will not run it inside of that binary unless it matches a signature from their endpoints. So hopefully, theoretically, they're executing things that follow their own rules. And apparently, according to chat, it's not an eval, it's only string data that has the rules. So hopefully that is the case. I'm sure as we read more, we'll learn more. Let's do that. By allowing the driver to read and perform instructions based on external context, regardless of what you call it, they're effectively bypassing the whole point of the WHQL certification of kernel mode drivers. Yes, because again, this isn't just a driver that runs after the OS boots. This is a boot required driver. The specific terminology, it's a boot start driver. Boot start drivers have stricter process they go through with Microsoft. Usually, these drivers have more rules and restrictions put on them because they block your system from booting. But since the driver itself was a small thing that was approved, it is loading logic from somewhere else, you can update it and skip all of the stuff. That's the chaos here. In the end, though, it appears that it is just a trivial, embarrassing bug in the driver that caused the crash itself, in turn triggered by some equally trivial, embarrassing process error during CrowdStrike's deployment of content updates. I do hate they call this content updates when it can cause things like this. That's like, imagine if somebody published a new video on YouTube and it took down YouTube. The videos are content. They're not code. My video doesn't change the code that executes. My video is just a new piece of content. And if CrowdStrike just has a list of things that they're checking for, that's one thing. But if the content update results in different evaluation and different code being run that could cause problems like this, that's not just a content update anymore. They can call it that all they want. They're fucking bullshitting. The content update that CrowdStrike sent out was full of zeros. This I did mention before. We didn't know fully how that happened or what the impact is. Hell, we still don't know why it happened. But that's chaos. Instead of the actual rules and the actual content, they sent out null. And if somebody was to post an empty video on YouTube, it wouldn't break all of YouTube. So failures on all sides there. Obviously, this was not the intended content, and the simple data caused the driver to crash, which in turn caused the system to crash, since it doesn't have much choice in the situation. As the driver is also marked as a boot start driver, it will always get loaded on reboot, even if it crashed last time. This is what makes it so time-consuming to fix. The driver can't just be flagged as faulty. This is just the mark of plain really, really bad software. Software runs in kernel mode with full privileges and can do anything, and giving it a bunch of zeros as input crashes it. Just not simply good enough. Yeah, again, if a hacker snuck something malicious in here, hopefully the output's being signed. We don't have any way to confirm that just yet. Regardless, terrifying. So here's what the author thinks everyone missed. The two glaring omissions in the analyses. The big failure. How is it possible that someone sends out an update affecting the behavior of kernel mode code all at once, simultaneously, to millions and millions of systems around the whole globe at once? This is actually funny because I was at Chain React when this all happened, a conference in Portland. The speaker at Chain React isn't a software developer. It isn't somebody from our ecosystem. It's somebody that the host met at Toastmasters. He's a math teacher teaching high school math. He's one of the best people to talk to I've ever had a conversation with. He's just so thoughtful and friendly and fun and good at speaking. There's a reason he's the host for this event. I bring him up because he was trying to understand what was going on with the CrowdStrike and blue screen of death stuff. And despite not being an engineer, he somehow managed to reverse engineer the concept of rolling releases, of like clean room testing, of having user-like systems to do confirmations on, and how rollouts work. He had reverse engineered just through his assumptions how these things should be done. And he himself was able to figure out that we shouldn't be shipping any code to millions of users at once. And we should be rolling that out and making sure it doesn't break things before we roll out further. So yeah, crazy that a math teacher seems to better understand how to do these rollouts than a massive security firm. But it also seems like the security firm's goal is investigations, not software, and they are kind of weak on the building side. They're more focused on the investigation and destroying side, which makes sense, but absolute mess. Let me know if I should do a whole video about my conversations with that math teacher, because I thought they were great. The only reasonable way to do global rollouts, especially for kernel code, is to stagger it. Start with 10 systems. What happens? Then 100, then 1,000. How did they just roll it out to everything at once? What the fuck? And the smaller failure. The kernel mode driver accepts external input but does no input validation. Perhaps it's digitally signed. As I mentioned before, nobody's confirmed this. But even if it is, the type of software must assume that it can't trust external content. According to Dave Plummer, the content update in question was all zeros, so at least no embedded digital signatures, apparently. Yeah, these are the problems. So they're obviously going to take care of this, right? Like, clearly they're going to jump and help all these companies out to the best of their ability. Yeah, they did that by offering a $10 Uber Eats gift card. $10. You can't get anything on Uber Eats for $10. That like almost covers the delivery cost. Are you joking? Like, CrowdStrike is treating this like the world's smallest issue. Like it's some little thing that someone else screwed up and they're just here for it. It's embarrassing. I actually cannot believe that they thought this would be a good idea and not just get memed on immediately. Their PR team should be fired, the entirety of it. They are so clueless, it's insane. But on topic of their PR team, let's take a look at their update to see how much of this they actually owned. What happened? On Friday, July 19th, as part of regular operations, CrowdStrike released a content configuration update for the Windows sensor to gather telemetry on possible novel threat techniques. These updates are a regular part of the dynamic protection mechanisms of the Falcon platform. How does the word regular appear? Oh, it's just these two. They're insisting that this is regular, though. I like that the word regular appears way before anything resembling the word sorry. By the way, there's still been nothing from CrowdStrike that resembles the word sorry or apology. And also the X button on their site to close this doesn't work. I'm just trying to close this red thing here, and I literally can't. It will not go away. Systems in scope include Windows hosts running server version 7.11 and above that were online between Friday at 4:09 UTC and 5:27. That is over an hour that these updates were going out. The fuck? That was at 9 p.m. Pacific time. I believe they're based in Texas, so that would have been an hour earlier, or an hour later, so it would have been around 10 p.m. So why are they shipping updates like this at 10 p.m. if they don't have someone around to stop it if there's an issue? Because I was at an arcade that started having issues around that time. Nonsense. Actual nonsense. Yeah, they reverted it over an hour later. And I love they're saying which systems weren't affected. Cool. Thanks for letting me know if my computer was off when your shit was broken. That is good. What went wrong and why? CrowdStrike delivers security content configuration updates to our sensors in two ways: sensor content that is shipped with our sensor directly, and rapid response content that is designed to respond to the changing threat landscape at operational speed. The issue on Friday involved a rapid response content update with an undetected error, the error being that it was all zeros. Sensor content provides a wide range of capabilities to assist in I don't care about sensor content updates. They're not the thing that mattered here. I was going to describe all of that. Cool. Thanks for the 4 paragraphs about the thing that isn't the problem. Fire your PR team, CrowdStrike. Seriously, they're almost as bad as your engineers. I hate just railing on a company because this is no one person's fault, but this is like, this level of cultural failure just suggests a level of ineptitude that I am struggling to fathom. Like, holy shit. Why are they're just gloating about the product. It's a highly optimized engine. I don't care. I want to do an analysis later where I count how many of the words here are them gloating about their product versus actually describing what the fuck happened. Because all 4 of these paragraphs have nothing to do with what happened. The rapid response content is stored in a proprietary binary file that contains configuration data. It is not code or a kernel driver. It's a proprietary binary file. Sure, you're The fact that it's not code which is to be compiled or a kernel driver which is already compiled and included in Windows, it's this fun in between thing. But you're acting like it's less important when it's actually more important than the code. Ugh. Rapid response content is delivered as template instances, which are instantiations of a given template type. Each template instance maps the specific behaviors for the sensor to observe, detect, or prevent. Template instances have a set of fields that can be configured to match the desired behavior. In other words, template types represent a sensor capability that enables new telemetry and detection, and the runtime behavior is configured dynamically by the template instance, like the rapid response content. Rapid response content provides visibility and detections on the sensor without requiring sensor code changes. This capability is used by threat detection engineers to gather telemetry, identify indicators of adversary behavior, and perform detections and preventions. Rapid response content is behavioral heuristics, separated and distinct from CrowdStrike's on-sensor AI prevention and detection capabilities. I think the goal of this blog post was to burn anybody out who's trying to figure out what actually happened, because that's how I feel right now. I'm not going to make y'all suffer through this whole thing, so I'm going to read it and find the interesting bits so that the video doesn't suck. Phase, chop accordingly. I'll let you know when it's time to start including things again. Whole link will be in the description if you want to read the whole thing, as well as the link for the previous thing we read that was actually concise and useful. Okay, one thing to include. I will say, as I'm starting to read this more deeply, the content interpreter is designed to gracefully handle exceptions for potentially problematic content. If by gracefully, you mean by taking down the entirety of 300 of the Fortune 500 companies in the world, like, you crashed hundreds of millions, if not billions of computers with your graceful exception handling. Holy shit. I actually can't fathom that they use the word graceful there. It's like a mini game to see how much they can fuck up. Legitimately. I actually cannot fathom that they used the word gracefully here without immediately following it with, sorry, we thought it did this and it didn't. Actually unfathomable. Okay, I finished reading this, and my conclusion is that either CrowdStrike is incredibly stupid or they are lying. The TLDR is they have their template types, which are how they check for specific types of patterns they're trying to prevent from hacking your system. They released an update in February that introduced a new type of template. They stress tested that in March, had no problems. They released it in April, and they had no problems. But then they deployed a new template that was using the new template type. These 2 additional IPC templates were deployed on July 19th. And one of the 2 passed validation despite containing problematic content data. The data was all zeros. It wasn't containing problematic data. It was problematic data. It was missing the actual data. It's like saying a car contains an issue and the car is on fire. It doesn't contain an issue. It is burning. There is no car left anymore. You can't point to the pile of rubble and say, yeah, the car had an issue. No, the car has been burned to the fucking ground. Insanity. Yeah, they claimed that they ran their checks and their previously successful IPC template instance deployments, leading them to thinking that this problematic data was good when it wasn't. I guess all zeros passed their validation, which is insane. Their validation does not work. And then we received the sensor and loaded it onto the content interpreter. Problematic content in channel file 291 resulted in out-of-bound memory read, triggering an exception. Yeah, because at every level you failed here. You failed to write an actual update that worked. You failed to verify that this update would work. You failed to stage the rollout to make sure systems wouldn't crash when they get it. And your actual driver code failed to throw a reasonable exception and bail when the content it got was bad. So literally every single step along the process you have failed, and you're claiming that this was one small thing being missed. No, literally every step in your process is garbage. Somebody in chat just said that they smell AI hallucinatory stuff. AI would have written a better post than this. It would have apologized somewhere. 911 was down, hospital machines went down like MRIs, emergencies got rerouted, people almost certainly died from this, and that's why they apologized with their $10 Uber Eats gift card. Sorry, Grandma, I know the heart attack was rough, but here's a $10 Uber Eats gift card that we gave to the hospital that couldn't take care of you. Absolute delusion. I cannot believe that these guys are in business still. I really hope they're sued off the planet. I'd rarely say that because it sucks. People are going to have to find new jobs. And there's a lot of great security engineers whose jobs are figuring out how things get hacked that work at this company that have nothing to do with this, that are going to get fucked over as the company falls apart. And it sucks. And I hope they get a lot of gift cards. Software resiliency and testing. Here is how they plan to prevent this all from happening again. They're going to improve the rapid response content testing by using testing types such as the following. Local develop... It's very funny to think that they might not have been doing this prior. Genuinely beautiful. Throw this one in the video phase. This can't be real. The lack of awareness is bordering on an artistic statement. I cannot fathom this being the reality we live in. I feel sick. How about instead of rollback testing, you do rollouts? You don't send it to millions of computers at once. Stress testing, fuzzing and fault injection, stability testing, and content interface testing. How about you update the driver so if it doesn't have a good content update, it doesn't crash your system? I can't believe I'm Excel drawing for this one, but this is bad enough it deserves it. Here are the things that went wrong. First, a bad content update shipped with all zeros. 2, this update rolled out to 100% of users immediately at 10 p.m. PT. 3, the boot start driver loads the new content. 4, the boot start driver crashes because of the bad content update. So why am I bothering to notate all of these? Because literally all 4 of these things should have been preventable with any level of competence. So let's go through all of the failures from 1 here. There should be validation or any CI on these updates. The fact that a new content update, like an item, one of these, whatever the fuck they call these transformer type things, could exist with all zeros, that somebody could push that and it's not immediately flagged in CI at that level, that's embarrassing. That is pathetic. Also, the fact that these updates aren't aggressively tested on creation. Like, did they just not run it? Did they never take the content, the binary that they created, and then test it on anything? This is just the steps before we even get to the deploy process. Did anyone review it? Like, if a human that wasn't the one who created it looked at this, that should have been obvious. So 3 massive failures at the content update level. Any of these things could have prevented this from happening. Insanity. Even just checking it on one computer would confirm this was bad. So that's just in step 1. There were 3 failures that any one of these being corrected would have kept this from happening. Step 2, why can we deploy updates that haven't been verified? If they had just checked that this update had run on one machine successfully one time before sending it out, this would not have happened. Or why not validate the data? If they just had basic data validation that made sure that's not all zeros that are in the update, like any level of can this even be parsed being included at this step before the rollout. Easy. Why did they not do that? Why not sign these updates? It's possible they're signed, but considering the fact that the binary that went out is all zeros with no signature in the header, it seems like they're not even signing the updates. So there's no way to validate it at the driver level before you actually try running the instructions in it. Actual fucking insanity. And then the biggest one, the one that I mentioned, that math teacher could quickly infer. To be fair, he inferred a lot of the things that we're covering here. But the big one, why not a rolling release? I think I get why on this one, because if there is theoretically a new virus they just discovered and they want to make sure that all their customers aren't affected by this new virus they just discovered, they want to send this checkout to everybody immediately. I just don't know which virus a bunch of zeros is protecting from. Regardless, they should have a system where they deploy to a subset of machines, ideally ones that are in their network that they have like direct access to, and they make sure that they're not literally fucking crashing or dealing with massive performance regressions before the next step. Because there are still issues here. It's possible that even if you check that all this is valid, that an update causes a huge performance issue and all of a sudden every customer's computer is running at 1/10 of the speed. None of this is prevented either. But it doesn't seem like that's the issue they ran into. They ran into literally crashing your system. Regardless, it's a mess. So step 1, there were 3 things they could have done better that I could think of immediately. Step 2, 4 things. The fuck. And God forbid you confirm it does what you expect it to. This honestly probably belongs here. So we'll say that there's 4 steps or 4 things here that they failed. They didn't even confirm that it does what it's supposed to. Because if they tried running it, they tried testing it, they tried doing anything, even just running it locally, they could have caught that this was broken. So we have all the failures for 1. There's at least 4 of them that I could think of. Then for step 2, at least 4 of them that I can think of. And we're still just getting started. The boot start driver loads the new content. Why does it do this during the boot start process? I understand why the driver is a boot start driver, because they want the driver to always be there when the computer is on. They don't want it to be possible to start up the computer, not have their antivirus running, and then get into the OS and have shit happening. But it can start the driver and not parse all of these additional new things until it's gotten in. Speaking of which, why does it not validate the content? If the driver is doing these content updates, and as they said, the content interpreter is designed to gracefully handle exceptions from problematic content. If by gracefully you mean blue screening on boot, sure, but no. At the very least, it should only be running content that it is verified works. During boot, running whatever content is there makes no sense at all, because I could have turned off Windows, connected via or just run a bootable OS off a flash drive, I don't know, Linux of some form, change the files in the file system, and then rebooted. And now it's going to fail because the boot start driver is going to load whatever the hell I put there. At the absolute least, the driver should keep a list of things that it has run in the OS before successfully, and on boot only include that content, not including all of the things that are there, because some of them might not work. And we only know that when the computer blue screened. Ideally, it's going to validate the content, though, rather than just running whatever it reads from. Somebody made a point that I'm 50-50 on, that is partly on Microsoft. Half agree. I think that skipping the WHQL certification process is dumb. I get why. As I said before, in order to deal with new risks that come out every day, you can't wait for Microsoft to approve a Windows update in order to ship that change. I understand why they don't want to do that, but the fact that they were effectively able to cheat their way through the certification by shipping a minimal driver that is a boot start driver, which should be treated with way more sensitivity, because all the code in the driver was fine, but then the code that's being loaded in using these content updates is bad. That's insane. It's actually unfathomable that they could get through the process, and I really hope Microsoft cracks down on this going forward. And of course, the obvious, why does it crash the whole system when a bad update is read? This is just unfathomable, especially when they said that it fails gracefully. It clearly doesn't. And there's a bunch of ways to handle this. If a crash occurs, don't try reading that content again. There's many more things I could think of if I just sit here, that at this step, the driver could have been written in any more competent way and prevented all of this. But none of that happened. Actually, some of these things belong in this section underneath here, these two parts. Yeah. So if we count what my dumb web dev butt could figure out about this, we have 4 things that could have prevented the first step, 4 things that could have prevented the second step, 3 things that could have prevented the third one, and 2 that could have prevented the fourth. Literally any single one of these things being done would have saved millions of computers, billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of people missing their flights, and so much immeasurable shit. It's unbelievable that the level of incompetence could exist there at a security company whose job is doing things right. They come in when the companies that are using their software fuck up, not because they fucked up. The thought that none of these things were done is actually hard for me to comprehend. And people get mad at us for forgetting a cookie in the wrong place or an undefined. Holy shit. Just looking at this list and realizing the level of incompetence on display is impossible to fathom. And I hope this helps emphasize why people are so angry, because there's a lot, and everybody's going to zero in on any one of these points. And I'm trying to avoid doing that because it's so tempting to just dig in on one of these sections and roast them for it. But there's no one thing they did wrong. It's literally everything. If they had not fucked up any one of these 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13 failures, any one of these not going wrong would have been fine. There's a thing in aviation called the Swiss cheese model. It's called the Swiss cheese model because if you take a bunch of slices of Swiss cheese from different things and you line them up, there isn't going to be a hole straight through because the holes in the Swiss cheese don't always line up. But if there's enough holes in all of the cheese, you end up with the risk that something goes straight through it. And if those holes happen to line up in the perfect way, you're fucked. Some of these holes are literally just the entire slice, not verifying the content update, not even running it before pushing it. That's not the Swiss cheese model. That's a bunch of slices you've just taken out for the shit of it. This is unbelievable. And I really hope anybody who is using CrowdStrike is reevaluating that decision, because this level of incompetence isn't something they fix with some smiley updates and by claiming that they were designed to gracefully handle exceptions. And it's certainly not going to be solved by local developer testing. This gets solved by firing everybody involved with this process who thought this was acceptable and then moving to a different vendor because they can't be trusted anymore. This is insane. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And the more that we learn, the more painful it gets. Also, just to prove it, The rapid response content deployment solution that they've planned to keep from happening in the future is that they're going to implement a staggered deployment strategy. They didn't have one. They have now formally confirmed by including this that they did not have staggered deployments. They did not do rolling releases. They have now formally stated that by putting this here. Improve monitoring for both sensor and system performance, collecting feedback during rapid. That doesn't help anything. The fact that they're not already keeping track of performance is pathetic, but if the machine's blue screen, they're not going to get any data anyways. Provide customers with greater control over the delivery of rapid response content updates by allowing granular selection of when and where these updates are deployed. Yeah, just blame the customer, because if they install too early of an update and they go down, it's their fault. Yeah, blame the customer more. I know you guys love doing that, CrowdStrike. And also give us release notes. God forbid you tell us what you're installing on our systems. Fuck. I knew I was going to get a little angry with this one, but I did not think it was this bad. I'm out of words. If you want to hear somebody else rage, I'm sure Low Level Learning's video about this is up too. I'm sure he's going to be as angry, if not more so than me. I have nothing else, though. Peace, nerds. They canceled the gift cards. Literally, they can't stop doing this to themselves. I can't fathom this. I actually can't. Holy shit. Oh, Uber canceled them because they thought they were fraud. That's even funnier. That's even funnier.